Hi, welcome to Reawakening Beauty. I'm your host, Shawna Patruno. I'm so excited to have you here. I love talking about all things skin-related, beauty-related, and mind-related. Here I empower you, mind, body, skin, and soul. Today, we have a very special guest, Victoria. I'm so excited to have her here for so many reasons. She is a writer and filmmaker, but she has a very empowering story. And before I get into it, Victoria, thank you for being here. Could you briefly introduce yourself a little bit more in depth?
Sure, yeah. Thank you so much for having me. As Shawna said, I'm an independent writer, filmmaker, an artist is pretty much how I identify. And I am also a gun violence survivor. So that has been part of my identity for the past 3.5, almost 4 years, kind of woven in to my purpose and my artistry, and just the healing is just part of my journey. So it's all kind of integrated now.
And that's why I was so excited to connect to you. But first, I want to empathize. What you went through is something that most people could not go through. And I wanted to say thank you for sharing your vulnerability and being here and opening your heart to share with others, because that's not easy. I wanted to ask you a question. What helped you kind of cope and deal with some of the things that had happened after going through something so tragic like that, Victoria?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for creating this safe space, because I have been asked to do other things as we are as survivors, just because it's kind of like a hot topic in our country and one of the social issues. So I would only do an interview like this if I felt like this was a safe space. So thank you for this incredible, the way that you interact with your guests. It just feels really safe and it feels like there's a purpose. So things like this definitely are like part of the solution to help me cope, but really just counting on really close friendships and family members that really do understand me, and even strangers. Oddly enough, you just start seeing the world so differently. So there's definitely angels along the way that have been very supportive to me. And then I think most importantly, just deepening my love for myself and my relationship with myself has been the biggest reward of all of this healing.
Wow, that's so amazing. And thank you for saying that about feeling that this was a safe space, because I really tried to create that. But going back to what the healing process looked like for you, you mentioned a little bit about self-love. So what did that journey turn into? Because I know there's a lot of things that can come up with like PTSD and just being scared. So what would you say about that?
Well, if we have time, I can like go into a little bit of the story and just kind of like a little background about like what happened, how it happened, and kind of like an overview of my healing journey, if that's okay with you.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so it was about 4 years ago, coming up in October. I was, a couple years out of college. I was working with my best friend. We were filming a pilot that we were so excited about, and we still are. It's pretty much like our baby, because it was our first project as creatives where we actually were able to raise a pretty great budget. And we probably spent a year in pre-production. It was our second time filming this project. We wrote it together, me and my writing partner, also my best friend, and we had done all the casting, all the pre-production. If you know the industry, you know how much work goes into casting and location scouting and just getting the story great, getting investors. And we were like on a high almost, because we were just like, wow, this is what dreams are like. Like, we've been thinking about doing this since we were little. And this was just like a super big opportunity. And we had done it by ourselves. So pretty much really feeling good about my work and my purpose. And for the first time, like really feeling like I belonged and I was doing something that I've just, again, been dreaming about since I'm little. So that's kind of where my headspace was, along with like being super busy, but happy. And in terms of my love life, I had just gotten dumped like 2 weeks before. So that's kind of like everyone I feel like knows what that feels like too. So you're kind of going through a heartbreak, but you're like 2 weeks after it, but you're like, hey, I'm doing this awesome thing in my work. So let me just charge all my energy into that. So, and having, by the way, like the best time of my life with my best friend. And then about a week before we were set to go film, I went away for the weekend. I was living in New York, where I was raised at the time. And I went to Las Vegas for my cousin, who's also one of my best friends' birthdays. And we had planned it before. So I was like, of course, I'm going to go. And it'll be a nice little way to relax before going full on in our production, because I knew it would take a couple months and, just really long hours and needing to be really focused. So I'm like, perfect. We're going to a country festival. There was a couple artists that I was so excited to see. I'm not a festival person, but we thought it'd be like a cool thing to do, to be able to see some of the artists we loved and just kind of like go out of our comfort zone a little bit, is what I was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And then we ended up having an amazing weekend. We're not really like big, I'm not going to speak on behalf of my cousin, but we're really similar. Like we don't really drink a lot, and like we're not hardcore partiers. We just like to have fun, and we're pretty chill. So we were spending so much quality time together. It was her birthday. The first 2 days were really cool. We saw some great artists. And then on the last night, which was her actual birthday, it was weird. Like she was a little anxious, and so was I, because it was really hot there. So we weren't drinking alcohol, but we were like switching off and like, okay, like I feel a little anxious. Like let's sit over here. Let's kind of do our own thing, because we were there together. So we're just very sensitive to each other's needs, because I think we're both like highly sensitive people anyway. And then like about an hour before, it was like the last hour of the entire weekend, I remember thinking like, oh, I kind of want to like go back to the hotel. I'm like, I know it's like, I want to like go back, get a little cake for my cousin and kind of like turn in early, because that was just like what I was thinking about. And I remember my phone was on a low percentage, and I kind of just felt like the night before I was really relaxed. Like I was dancing, having a ball to Sam Hunt. But this set, I was like kind of counting down to like when the whole thing would be over, because I suddenly just started to feel like something in my gut and my intuition was like, okay, like maybe go home early or something. Like, but of course, like my cousin's birthday and you want to just stick it out. We were on the same page, but it was just like, why would we leave when this is the headliner? So I'm just going into detail to kind of like paint the picture as I remember it. And then what happened was, and this is a trigger warning for just anybody who has dealt with violence. I know I'm in that category because I get really like scared by things like this, but I'm only going to tell you the details just to kind of like paint the picture and the reality of what happened. But yeah, like, and just so everyone knows, like I'm so sensitive. I'm the type of kid that would sit in the other room when my family was watching a scary movie and like turn around and like not want to talk about ghosts and like not want to hear a scary story. It was so sensitive and fearful and anxious my whole life. So if you can relate to that, then
Yeah.
but you'll actually end up being empowered by my story if so. So that's also good to know. But yeah, so then I kind of just started, again, I said like strange things. Like I was like, my cousin's like, are you sure you're okay? Like you look a little like dizzy now. And I'm like, no, like I'm a little nervous in this crowd for some reason, but I'm going to face my fears tonight and just like kind of power through. And that was really powerful for me because I don't know why I said it, but then obviously it became very evident why afterwards. And so I kept kind of looking down and I just put my phone on airplane mode because it was like coming up to that point. And the actual shooting started at 10:05. That was like the big mark. But I heard this like clapping sound and I was like, it just didn't sit right with me. And nobody else seemed to be like shook at all. So I just kind of like looked at my cousin and she was like on the same page as me. We just kind of were like, huh, what was that? And then I looked around and I kind of asked a couple people, like, did you hear that? And they're like, oh, that's just firecrackers. I guess fireworks is what they meant. And I'm like, really? Because like that didn't sound like that. And then I just kind of grabbed my cousin and she was right on the same page as me. And I'm like, I kind of want to get out of here because that just made me nervous. I grabbed her and we just kind of started running before anyone else started running. And I assume now, like looking back, that could have been him like emptying something out or test shooting, but I'm not really concerned with what he was doing. I just knew that it was a clapping sound that I didn't like. And so I grabbed my cousin, and as we were running, we were in the middle of the crowd. So as we were jetting out, that's when the really loud noises started. And then like maybe like a couple seconds after, that's when the artist jumped off stage, but like he was still playing as we were running. So we got a little bit of a head start from the middle. And again, this was, I think 22,000 people were there. So we were in the dead center of this. And so we got a little head start, but then it was about 10 to 11 minutes. And it was really like a really long 10 minutes of hearing, like, I think it was like 99 bullets per second. Just like, and usually I don't usually talk about the shooter because I try to just take him out of the equation and give him like less airtime. But all I know is my experience and the people around me. And I did see a lot of people die in really scary ways as well. And just like, I guess in my mind, I always envisioned like if I ever saw someone die, like I would pass out, because even hearing about stuff, like I'm the type of sensitive soul that would throw up hearing a story. Like my mom and my sister, they were always concerned about how anxious I was. But lo and behold, like in the moment, my cousin and I did end up surviving. A lot of people around us didn't make it. You know, we separated because I remember just saying like, I love you, just run. Whatever we did, we were lucky. I did a zigzag run. I was kind of like talking to my dad who passed away when I was younger, and I was asking him to guide my footwork. And all I keep remembering is like just thinking like, this isn't the time for me to go. And I know that, but I'm going to hold my head, hold my calves, keep checking if I do get shot, just because so many people are. And I need to live because I'm filming my pilot next week, and also my mom. Like it was my mom and my pilot. Those were the last things at the forefront of my brain on things to consider. So those two things kind of got me through. I was scared, but I didn't cry and I didn't faint, something I thought I would. And I didn't throw up, and I didn't pause and see what everyone else was doing. I just followed my own intuition, and I jumped to like one fence and one wall that were pretty high, and I got knee injuries, but I wasn't touched by one bullet. And there were a lot of bullets flying in my direction. And unfortunately, I did see people who were right next to me go, but I couldn't help them because if I did, I would have also been a casualty. And that was very clear. Also, we didn't know exactly what was happening. So after jumping the fences, like people were still dying, and I saw all of that, and I was like hiding in a bush, and you would kind of wait till it stopped and then run to the next bush, but then it would start again. And it was kind of just a nightmare because it felt like a war zone. And I mean, about 60 people passed away, hundreds got shot, and then thousands, were injured in one way or another. So it was very traumatic. And I think in modern history, it was the deadliest mass shooting to date. And yeah, it was a mess. I mean, I lost my phone. The adrenaline, though, is something that I never expected that a girl like me would have. And so that was the inner strength that I was really surprised to meet for the first time, because I always considered myself the fearful girl, like who didn't want to go on the ride or was scared of heights or couldn't listen to like bad news, or I would start crying. My family had to kind of like tiptoe around me. So that inner strength, I definitely met her that day. And it would be a while before I actually reunited with my cousin, because I had to go to a gas station and jump on the back of a truck and run a half mile all without a phone. But I was just so grateful when I finally knew I was in the clear, because it was very unclear to me, like if I was safe. Just because I didn't know if bombs were being dropped, it just seemed like it was an apocalypse. So I called my mom from a gas station, woke her up, and I was like, Mom, you're going to see it on the news. I don't know if my cousin's okay. And I just think I just survived a terrorist attack, but I have to go. And my mom was just like, whoa, what? Like, you don't know where your cousin is? And I was like, and then it hit me, and I'm like, my adrenaline is so high that like, I do need to know if she's okay, but I'm on such a different, I didn't even shed a tear yet. But then I did,
Wow.
because I'm like, I'm telling my mom I'm okay, but I don't even know if I am, because I don't know what's out there. I don't know if the whole city is being mobbed, because that's what it looked like. So that's like the actual story. And then after that, it was just, obviously I had to get my cuts clean to get the tetanus shots, but I didn't have major physical injuries, like had a neck injury, and like other things happened to my body just because of stress that would come months later. But as far as all of that, that was the actual night of. And I mean, there's so many more details that I'll like spare everyone, but you get the kind of gist of it. I did meet a friend running like in the bushes who was really sweet, and we keep in touch because we both kind of lost our people. So we were able to hold hands together and like kind of like pray and get on the back of the truck together. So that was like a really nice moment. And we reunited with our family at the same time. So that was sweet. But it was a very focused time for me. And what I was focusing on is getting me and my cousin out of there initially, just making sure we were able to run, separating because we're less of a target, and just living, like just surviving, and the will to survive, and just kind of the knowing that I was not ready to not be here. So those are the things that were crystal clear. And since then, it's just been a journey. I mean, I went right into filming because it was my purpose. And more than ever now, I was like, this is my purpose. And I'm here to tell this story as a storyteller. So I went into
Wow.
filming my pilot. And for 3 months, I was pretty busy. And then around the holidays and January, I started to feel severe PTSD. So since then, it's just been a really big journey on healing my nervous system and just really this new reality. It is better. Like I do feel happier. I feel like my life is better now than before. It's just so different. And there's been a lot of obstacles, but overall, I do feel like a happier version of myself and more myself than ever. It's just healing is still ongoing, So it's been a journey.
I don't even have words for what you just explained. I actually had to hold back from crying at some of the things because I'm very much an empath. So, what I heard from you is like you just had this inner knowing, and you mentioned a little bit of life change for you and that you kind of had to readapt to a new way of living. What did that look like? Like what practices to have compassion for yourself? Because from one minute you're having all this adrenaline, which I just heard, and now you're going to having to live in regular life where people have never gone through this. And this is what I'm hoping that we can share with other people is how can we help someone who's gone through something like this? What would you say?
Yeah. So I think that, we're all walking around with trauma. That's something that I've definitely learned. I just think there's different kinds of trauma, even though I feel like it's all the same in a way. But of course, something that I went through, is a mass shooting. It was also mass violence. Just it's, on a large level, you're like, I think the level of trauma of my shooting is being studied almost because almost because it's like, it was so specific because it was like coming from above. And it's just a whole nother level of mass violence that I feel like is not normal, to the human experience. We can tolerate certain amounts of stress and life is hard, but this kind of thing just kind of resets your whole nervous system. And I think that as survivors, we have to become really close with ourselves. Like loving ourselves is not about liking what we look like and liking our personality and just like generally liking ourselves. It's about like, how much do you love yourself? Like you love yourself enough to have gone through something like this and survived. So like now, how are you going to live your life to like give thanks to yourself and appreciate the anxiety you have and appreciate what your nervous system has done for you while also kind of like calming it down. And that's kind of like our plight. And it is difficult out in the world because I think a lot of people, especially like the years following my shooting, because in America, divisiveness and between social media and the divisiveness of our country, it was a whole nother battlefield. Like, I almost feel like it was worse than the actual event was the aftermath. I would say there's so many beautiful souls who are just have so much empathy and make me feel like the strongest, most empowered survivor in the world. But there's been a lot of people in my life who didn't really afford me the same, not coddling, but like comfort, I guess. And they weren't as inspired by me. And, obviously most people in my life were incredible, but it's like you just change kind of your view. And then it's also just like the strangers that you encounter. You could bond over something like this and they could give you the biggest hug and just, it feels like soup to your soul. And then you meet strangers who really don't understand something like this. And they're almost like threatened by my truth. And it's been really hard for me, at least. I don't know about all survivors, but finding my confidence and finding my voice in this national conversation has been one of the biggest points of growth for me. And it hasn't been easy, but I will say it's been one of the most rewarding uphill battles that I've had, because I kind of feel like I'm finally finding my voice in all of this. And it just like lends itself to so many other lessons and so many, I can't really explain it. Just, I feel like my voice has been something that I've never been really strong in. Like, I've always had difficulties really communicating. And now, because of, I was forced to do it. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, I was forced to kind of find my voice. It almost like accelerated it and my worth. And I feel really empowered by that, because it's been like a really challenging last few years and very emotional too, because I do deal with PTSD and I do deal with like survivor's guilt has been something that I've been really struggling with, and just seeing the bigger picture and not really like just understanding the frustration that there's not everyone out there who understands this experience. And it's so annoying because I just want to like give them the wisdom and empathy that they need, and like they can do what they want with it. And it's frustrating to not be able to like show them without them having to go through something like this, just what survivor's guilt looks like for us. And just a little empathy goes such a long way. So
I definitely agree. People should be a lot more compassionate for things that they don't know. As someone who's gone through something like such a tragedy, the way that you relate to the world is very different. So thank you for sharing that. Going forward, is there something that you think that we could do as a society to help lessen gun violence, or something that you would like to share with your voice now that you've kind of evoked that in yourself? What is the message you would like to share today?
Well, it's so complex. So I feel like I can't propose a solution that'll change things overnight. However, I mean, I would be the happiest person in the world if at least we could start kind of having more conversations about gun safety. Like, that's more on a political level, and it feels a little bit out of my reach because there's so many factors. But of course, like, I would love for Senate to like pass the background checks, and it just seems like we're far away from doing that. But I think at the very least, just like on a heart level, just when you meet someone who has gone through mass violence or any kind of trauma, even if it's something that you've gone through too, and you've closed your heart off to it, because there's a lot of people who are like, well, I've gone through that and I don't complain about it or victimize myself, and just kind of like drop into your heart more when you speak to people and like really trying to understand them, and it'll help you kind of understand yourself. And I feel like if we just connected better, things like this wouldn't be such a prevalent thing. If we could try to, I don't know, it's tough. You can't solve it overnight, but I just wish people would have heart-to-heart conversations and not always be on the defense, because that's something that I've noticed. And hey, I'll try to do it too, because I meet people who say things and it's so upsetting to me. And maybe if I try to understand them, which I do try to, maybe that'll help them too. So that's something that I'm going to push myself to do as well. But yeah, I would just say dropping into your heart. And if something bothers you or triggers you, or you have a different opinion, like kind of thinking about why and in what ways can you connect to that person.
I definitely agree. I think if we could communicate openly, like we would expect people to hold space for us, if all of us could get into that place, basically holding the same appreciation that somebody else could, and really speak our truth to people, how much better would that be for society? As far as gun violence, I know it's gun violence awareness. Is there any projects you're working on that you would like to share, or anything that's kind of on your heart right now that we could
Yeah.
maybe help you with?
Sure. Yeah. So I was very hesitant to, my genre is magical realism, and I kind of stick to lighter dramas and comedies. But I feel like I'm really being called to speak my own truth. And that's what I want to do in my work anyway. So I am working on a short film. It's called 1004. We are just at the beginning of pre-production for it, because I think I was kind of like 1 foot in, 1 foot out at first, just because I wanted to tell my story, but I kept getting scared because I was still healing and there's a lot of backlash and just finding the courage to do it. But now I'm really, really excited because I've rewritten the script and it's completely magical realism. It's about a girl who survives mass violence, and time is definitely not linear because she keeps going back in time to before the shooting and after. And it's just her journey back to herself and finding the moment before her life changed. Every time she's going through something sad, she kind of holds on to the truth of who she is, which for me is 1004, because my shooting happened at 10:05. So I'm calling it 10:04 because that was the moment before everything, the reality changed for me. So it's going to be a really beautiful self victory, self discovery in a little short film. So I'm really excited about that. And I'll probably be launching a little campaign for it in a couple weeks after we film the promo. You could look out for it. I'll post about it on Instagram too.
Awesome. Where is your Instagram handle so they can follow you as well?
So it's at Victoria, Victoria, and then Perivo.
So for everybody who's listening, I'll also post a lot of that in my show notes, just so you can kind of stay in touch with Victoria. Or do you like to talk to people about it, or how do you like to connect with people?
Yeah, I love talking to anyone who brings kind of like an inspiring story to me, or someone going through something similar, or even just hearing that my story was resonant to you and what you're going through. I guess like my only boundary is like people coming to me and like trying to have a debate about gun control. Like that's just something that like I'm not available for. But anything else, I love to connect to people.
I love that you set a boundary as well. I'm really big into that. So thank you for doing that. Yes, self-love. So I would love to have you back. I know that we didn't get to talk about everything else. I know there's a lot of healing modalities that you did with your journey as well. And perhaps we can have another conversation about some things and tools, because I know you're really into that and you really foster the self-love and the spiritual side. So I would love to have you back. But thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your vulnerability. My words could not empathize, so I apologize if it sounded at all like I did not care. As much as you probably felt in shock, I'm in shock of the story. And thank you for sharing yourself on this platform. And you're amazing. And thank you for what you do. So I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. You're the best. I really, really appreciate this safe container. It is just so enjoyable and feels so great to be able to talk to you too. So thank you for all that you're doing too.
Thank you so much for listening to the latest episode of Reawakening Beauty. Subscribe to the podcast to hear more inspirational stories and tips related to all things mind, beauty, skin, and soul. I also encourage you to check out the show notes for additional information about my guest, the topics discussed during the episode, and of course, more information about me, your host, Shawna Patruno. If you want to be a guest on the show or just want to reach out and say hi, you can reach me on Instagram, LinkedIn, or email. All these details can be found in my show notes. Thank you so much for listening and have an amazing day.